I believe it's working now. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the social media channels we have on X and LinkedIn and YouTube. Um, we have got a great show. I was just telling the folks who joined on the Zoom webinar interface how stoked I am for what we have. I'm about to start sharing the slides, and I think we can get things underway. Okay. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Flower Monthly February. As you know, we always have these events on the first Wednesday of every month, and we try to showcase what's been happening in the Flower community, in the world of federated learning, and try to invite some people to give their different perspectives on everything that's going on. And so my name is Nicholas Lane. It's great to be here. Here we have an agenda for this meeting. We're going to kick things off as per normal with a brief set of flower updates. So I've cherry picked for you some of the kind of really most interesting things that have happened in the last 30 days. And then you can see here we have three separate speakers talking to you about different parts of the federated learning universe, really. We are going to start things off with Alan. Alan is from Purdue University, and he's been doing some pretty interesting work at the intersection of federated learning and quantum computing. And so it's not the first time we've seen people do interesting experimentation, exploration in this sort of interface. And so I'm kind of pretty interested to see what he has to say on how these things map to medicine and neuroscience. We are going to hear from Alan, and then afterwards change format and have a bit of a chat with Micah. He just joined Flower Labs in the last, I think, about week or so. Spent 20 years at Intel doing incredible things in the world of federated learning and SGX. And I've known him actually personally for quite a number of years now. So it's great to have him join the team. And what we're going to do is just have a bit of a chat about his thoughts on the federated learning space and things in general. So it's a great chance for everyone to get to know Micah a bit better. And then after that, we're going to transition to a presentation by one of the winning teams at the Distributed AI Hackathon that we ran back in Berlin a few months ago. They won a particular category, and I saw that they're going to give us a recap, I guess, of their efforts at that hackathon, but also perhaps some of the thoughts about the hackathon in general. So I'm really excited to hear from all of them. We have Edgar, Emirkan, and Justus. So fantastic, these representatives of that team that won. We're looking forward. But before we get to that, let's talk about Flower updates. And so the first Flower update is that the Flower AI Summit for 2026 is coming again to London mid-April. And so this has become the world's largest open source gathering of federated learning and decentralized AI in the world. If you want to register, I recommend that you do so promptly, because we have never seen so many registrations happen in the first 3 weeks of it opening. And so just to give you a sense, if you haven't been before, we book out this entire venue here that you can see called King's House. It's about 5 minutes or maybe 3 minutes walk from King's Cross Station, which is the dead center of AI within London. Very adjacent to all the big labs. Also very adjacent to the best, or some of the best AI-centric universities in the UK. And then we always have this after-hours event over the road at a great social venue. And so you get the full spectrum of keynote speakers, open source contributions from the Flower community, announcements from Flower itself. And this year, I should emphasize that we see some great things being done in our community and also being done by ourselves in the dimension of agents and federated learning and decentralized learning. And so one of the call-out themes for this year is going to be open source, federated, and agentic AI. And so if you've got thoughts on that, if you've got sort of contributions in that direction, we'd love to hear from you. You can just simply go to this website here that's on the Flower page, and you can register for free, or you can, and you can also submit a proposed contribution. A contribution can be in the form of a talk, a poster, a demo. We love demos, and so don't miss out. The other things I want to highlight was that Flower has been really engaged in many events around the world. So one of the things I wanted to highlight was in New York, Amazon ran a Trusted AI Symposium. We had Demetrius and William from Flower. William is based in New York, so it was easy for him to get to. And so Flower submitted a contribution to the symposium on privacy and enabling trusted forms of AI. It was accepted, and they got to, William and Demetrius got to present this work at this event and network with the other people who are so interested in this really, one of the most important dimensions of AI today, really. Other events that Flower's been involved in include Pedro. Pedro was in London all last week. Maybe was it last week? I think so, yeah, last week in London for two of the biggest genomics events that happen sort of anywhere, I think. We have a lot of genomics workloads and people building genomics federated types of compute out there. So he wanted to sort of meet people really studying genomics types of problems, meet them firsthand, and then also connect with existing users of Flower at these two events. I should also mention that in a different part of the world, during the same week, we had Micah, who you'll be hearing from soon, and Patrick Foley, who attended an event organized at Berkeley that was really a federated learning boot camp for those who want to be sort of exposed to what sort of the latest R&D, the latest research in the space. And at that event, they had some of the best speakers in the world on this sort of topic, and which is why Micah and Patrick were there representing Flower. The last thing I wanted to show was actually the most recent thing that we've announced, and that was announced earlier this week on Monday. We announced the kind of successful launch of a collaboration that's been about a year in the making with StarCloud. StarCloud is one of the leaders in space-based AI infrastructure. And so they're this network of satellites that offer almost like a data center orbiting the Earth, spread across different kinds of satellites. And so working with them, we showed that Flower and its sort of decentralized principles can actually operate fully autonomously on satellites, doing fine-tuning of production-grade models to satisfy the use cases that are so commonly deployed in space, such as tracking floods, monitoring weather, all these kind of like Earth observation-based workloads. But importantly, these building blocks that we proved out with this successful launch and announcement on Monday go much further than that. And so we look forward to working with them more intensely and being able to do more and more of AI in space when it makes sense in terms of cooling and access to energy and importantly data as well. So you can see lots of things happened this month in Flower. With that, I'd like to transition to our first invited speaker. And so we are delighted to have joining us Alan. Alan Y is at Purdue University. And as I mentioned earlier, he is going to be talking to us about what happens when you bring federated learning and quantum computing together. So over to Alan.
Thank you for the introduction, Nick, and inviting me onto the panel. I will share my screen. So hi, I'm Alan. I'm an undergraduate researcher in Sequoia in Purdue. And today I'll be sharing how federated learning and quantum computing can come together as quantum federated learning, and why it matters specifically in secure medicine and earth science. And I'll start with the motivation and then show two concrete examples. First, a privacy-preserving quantum federated learning setup using fully homomorphic encryption. And second, our quaffle flood segmentation work. So machine learning is useful for many tasks, for example, image classification, segmentation, object detection, and anomaly forecasting. But because of privacy and data overhead, it may not be practical to train centrally. So federated learning could help decentralize this training process, and the clients will train locally on their own data sets and then send them to a global server. However, as modern data sets grow in size and complexity, training on classical methods can become slow and resource intensive. So researchers are exploring quantum computing as a new compute model for machine learning, especially for compact representations in hybrid quantum and classical architectures. And the underlying unit is a qubit. So what is a qubit? A classical bit is either always 0 or 1, but a qubit is a physical system with two basic outcomes. When you read it, you get 0 or 1, but before you read it, the qubit can be a blend of those two possibilities, which is called a superposition. When you measure it, you see a 0 or 1, but the state determines the probability of each outcome. With n qubits, the system is described by a joint state with 2 to the power of n possible basis patterns, which grows rapidly with n. And combining qubits together, a quantum circuit is just a sequence of operations, superposition, entanglement, and measurement applied to these qubits. And operations can change the joint state as it passes through the circuit, and then we measure it to get the ordinary numbers back. In practice, you can think of it as a forward pass. A fixed sequence of gates is applied, and the output is obtained by measuring one or more qubits, often by representing the circuit many times to estimate the measurement statistics. So in quantum machine learning, we use these circuits as learnable modules by doing two steps. So first, we encode an input feature vector into the qubits using a feature map. So the input becomes a quantum state. This maps the data into a higher dimensionality representation that can yield richer nonlinear features after measurement. Then we apply a parameterized quantum circuit, meaning the circuit has trainable parameters. You can think of them as weights. And then after measurement, we post-process the measured values into ordinary features using a small classical layer, and then we compute the task loss. So this training might look familiar. You run the circuit forward, measure the outputs, compute a loss, and use a classical optimizer to update the parameters. And this can reduce the number of parameters in the model. So we use a hybrid approach. You keep most of the network classical, but swap one block into a quantum module. And you can still train end-to-end. The parameterized quantum circuit is just another differentiable layer. In hybrid models, inserting a parameterized quantum circuit at a low dimensionality bottleneck can therefore reduce the number of trainable parameters while maintaining representational capacity. So combining this together, quantum federated learning combines federated learning and quantum machine learning, aiming to maintain the privacy and collaboration benefits of federated learning while exploring whether quantum models can provide more expressive, parameter-efficient representations. In this setting, each client trains a hybrid quantum classical model locally, and a central server aggregates the model updates across clients without collecting raw data. And this makes quantum federated learning appealing for domains with sensitive or geographically distributed data sets, such as healthcare and remote sensing, where both privacy constraints and data heterogeneity are major barriers to centralized and to classical centralized training. Yeah. So at Sequoia, we've been pushing quantum federated learning in a few directions. Our early works include healthcare-focused learning, secure distributed learning, and then later earth science applications. We've also published a tutorial with Flower. So now we'll be exploring some examples, and hopefully this will give everyone some insights on how they can explore quantum federated learning in their own industries or applications. So the first example starts from a challenge that that industries face when thinking about machine learning. And the fact is that many data sets are highly sensitive. Think medical data, proprietary industry data, or personal data. And we need to find a way to ensure the privacy of these data sets. Federated learning helps by decentralizing the training data so that the clients do not need to send the data to the central server. However, it is still prone to inference attacks. Inference attacks are attempts to extract private information from a trained model or its updates. And fully homomorphic encryption is a form of encryption that lets you perform computations directly on encrypted data without ever decrypting it first. After the computation, decrypting the result gives the same answer you would have obtained by computing it in plain text. So in federated learning, that means the server can aggregate the updates without ever seeing what the model is in plain text. But the catch is that this adds significant overhead. And depending on the scheme, you can get approximation effects that may hurt performance. So the question is, can quantum computing help? Our solution here is clients train a quantum enhanced model locally, so a hybrid quantum neural network. And before sending updates, they encrypt them first. And the server performs aggregation in the encrypted space, and the clients decrypt the aggregated model for the next round. The central hypothesis is that a quantum enhanced model can help preserve the representational quality under these constraints. Empirically, the results show that accuracy is largely preserved, often with only small differences compared to the non-FHE versions. And there is improvement in from the non-quantum versions, showing the expressivity of the quantum layers. But the runtime may seem longer because it is run on a simulation, not on a real quantum computer right now. The simulation was done with Penny Lane and on GPUs. In conclusion, the more complicated architecture of federated learning with FHE induces a trade-off from speed to privacy. We have shown that new computing methods, and in particular quantum computing, can be used in these machine learning models as a tool to accelerate local computations. The small-scale clients models in federated learning are more amenable to the limits encountered on current quantum devices. And this matters because privacy-preserving training is essential in healthcare and in industrial settings where data cannot be centralized. Yet models still need to improve through collaborations across institutions. Now, the second example is Quaffle, quantum unit-assisted federated learning and estimation, built for the NASA Beyond the Algorithm challenge. And the challenge prompt is basically, can unconventional computing methods help flood water analysis? And floods are important to analyze because they can rapidly destroy infrastructure and displace communities. And the task we chose to tackle is image segmentation. So for each pixel, we want to predict whether it is flooded or not flooded. And this is different than just detecting if a flood exists somewhere. Segmentation gives a detailed flood extent map, which makes it different than the previous example, which is only classification. And that map supports flood mapping at scale, continuous detection and monitoring as conditions change, guiding emergency response and resource allocation, and post-event damage assessment. Segmentation is also unforgiving as small boundary errors can become big differences in area estimates. So our evaluation isn't just about accuracy as a single number, it's about producing maps that are reliable under different conditions. The first challenge is simply scale. Flood datasets can be huge, big geographic coverage, multiple timestamps, and sometimes multiple sensor channels. This creates practical bottlenecks such as storage, preprocessing, training time, and compute availability. The second challenge is that the data comes from diverse data sources. For flood analysis, you might have optical imagery, radar imagery, and sometimes fixed cameras or other sensors. And each modality has different failure modes. Optical can be obstructed by clouds or lightning changes, while radar has noise but can be robust under weather conditions. And the third challenge is regional variability, which we can think of as non-heterogeneous data. Flood patterns and image appearance depend on geography, infrastructure, land coverage, land cover, sensor settings, and even local weather conditions. So two regions can produce very different data distributions, even if the label flooded is the same conceptually. And in practice, this is a major reason why models fail when moving across regions. And this also immediately motivates federated learning. Regional data is naturally decentralized, and we want that training that respects these separate distributions while still learning a global model that generalizes. The standard baseline for segmentation problems like this is a UNet, and it is popular because it learns multi-scale features. So it downscales and then captures the global context, and then the skip connections preserve the fine-grained spatial details for these clean masks. And the trade-off is that UNets can be parameter-rich and resource-intensive, especially when you scale them up for multi-channel inputs. In other words, UNets work well, but training and deploying them across many clients or many regions can become slow and intensive. And this is the opening for asking whether we can keep the strengths of UNet while making the representation more compact or efficient. So then we asked ourselves, can quantum computing help reduce the size of these models and make the models more expressive? And our approach, Quaffle, combines both federated learning and quantum computing. So federated learning lets each client train on local data and only shares the updates rather than the raw images. And that is important in earth science because data can be distributed across agencies, regions, or institutions, and moving large imagery around is expensive, even when it is allowed. Federated learning also naturally exposes the global model to multiple regional distributions, which can improve robustness if done carefully. So it gives us a practical, scalable training scheme that aligns with these constraints. And each round, the server broadcasts the model, they train on their own local data, and then it sends the updates back, and then it repeats. At each local node, we replace the UNet bottleneck layer with a quantum circuit. And research shows that this replacement allows us to maintain prediction accuracy with less parameters. indicating increased training efficiency. This bottleneck is also where features are most compressed, so qubit requirements are minimized. And this will be much better for simulations on quantum computers. But at the bottleneck, you've already compressed the representation, so you can map that lower dimensionality feature vector on a smaller number of qubits. And together, these elements make QUAFL, a quantum hybrid federated learning technique for flood analysis. We implemented and tested a basic version of QUAFL on a combined dataset of optical and radar images, and we already see a 6% reduction in parameters. This model was tested on unseen optical and SAR radar data. Here is our prediction, and this is the ground truth. And we benchmark this against classical centralized units, and these are the results. So in terms of accuracy, QUAFL outperforms the classical and non-federated architectures, and this shows how quantum federated learning can help account for the diverse features of the different data sources. Moreover, we evaluated QUAFL on 2 quantum computing platforms to show the approach is not tied to a single backend. So we simulated a gate-based version using PennyLane, where the quantum layer is implemented as a parameterized circuit with standard gates and trained end-to-end with a hybrid model. And in parallel, we simulated a photonic version using Orca's SDK, which models photonic circuits and provides an alternative hardware. Here is a probability map of the water regions that we tested both versions on. And our accuracies were comparable to that of the classical versions. And this shows that QUAFL can be implemented on many types of current noisy quantum devices. Now, to summarize the benefits of using quantum federated learning in flood analysis, QUAFL is flexible and it can leverage data of different types and regions, and is easily generalizable to other applications. And also using the collective knowledge from a global model, even resource-limited data centers would have a trained model for use. QUAFL is efficient as it reduces the computational burden for the central server and uses fewer training parameters. Federated learning removes the need to share these massive and often private data sets, overcoming geographic and jurisdictional barriers. It only requires a few qubits, so it is amenable to current quantum devices and has been shown to work through our simulations. So it's ready to be implemented now and scalable on today's hardware. QUAFL doesn't depend on a specific hardware and is compatible with multiple quantum platforms. And this ensures adaptability as quantum technology advances. So for the next steps, we plan to broaden our data sources by incorporating additional regions, data disaster events, and sensing modalities so we can test generalization under real distribution shifts. We can also benchmark QUAFL against stronger baselines and alternative architectures, both classical and hybrid, to understand when the quantum bottleneck helps and when it doesn't. Finally, we aim to move beyond purely simulated quantum layers by evaluating on real quantum hardware, measuring not only the accuracy, but also the latency, stability under noise, and system cost. And now it is your turn. We recently published a blog in Flower about our research and results. So feel free to take a look and see how you can implement it. And in our new Quick Start Quantum Federated Learning example, we demonstrate how to train a hybrid quantum classical neural network on the CFAR10 dataset using PennyLane and Flower. And we encourage you to experiment with the tutorial by adjusting the number of clients, qubits, or circuit depth to see how they affect learning performance and coverage. Thank you.
Great talk. Very interesting. If anyone connected to the Zoom webinar wants to ask a question, just raise your hand. I'll also check Slack and other places where people can submit questions. We've got time for a couple of questions to see what people want to ask, but that was a really, really interesting piece of work. I'm just scanning the sources here. There's one question actually. It says, you showed a slide that indicated a 6% reduction in parameters compared to centralized. And the question is, can you summarize other benefits of this approach? Can they be quantified? So I guess because the slide here, you picked out on the 6% parameter piece of it.
Right. So this helps in mainly two ways. One way is that it actually reduces the size of the model. And this is important in federated learning because you're sending that model to the central server and then it aggregates it over and over. So then if the model size is very big, it might induce a like overhead in terms of data. And by reducing the number by reducing the model size, it might be better for the network bandwidth. And optimistically speaking, the second advantage is that it could potentially lead to more efficient ways to perform these computations. And it could be better in terms of time or resources. But that's something that needs to be tested still.
Okay, very cool. Micah, feel free to ask your question here.
Yeah, so the 6% fewer, I'm assuming that's just overall comparing the two versions of the unit, correct? That's just in total 6%.
Right, 6%
Do you have
overall.
do you have the reduction for specifically the section that the quantum module replaces? Because my suspicion is that the 6% number is actually underselling the potential, just because you're only applying it to that skinny part at the bottom of the unit.
Right.
And I'm wondering, that
Yeah, that's a
specific
very
section of the reduction.
So yeah, I can pull up the unit again. So we replaced actually not even the whole bottleneck of the unit. We only replaced a certain proportion. And this is because it would be faster for us to simulate. And in theory, we can reduce it even more. We can replace the whole bottleneck with a quantum circuit, and in this way, we can reach higher percentages of reduction. And usually with these, we use a hybrid approach. So it's not it's not practical to turn the whole thing into a quantum circuit because in the beginning the dimensions of your image is very large, right? And it'll take many qubits to implement. So we only have it at that one bottleneck layer.
Ooh. Makes sense. That's a great point, I think, by Micah. So I have another question that came in, and the question is, can you tell me more about how the encryption works in FL? If I remember correctly, there were some issues at the server side using encrypted messages. Thanks. And then it goes on, it says, for example, the point of encryption is to protect privacy. How do you aggregate messages without decrypting them?
Right. So you're asking about FHE, correct?
Yeah, I guess so. That was the part where I guess it's the only part where
yeah.
you use encryption. This is a fine place to answer this question, I think.
Right. So in this part, so there's these attacks, these inference attacks where they can basically take the model and then they can like try to poke it and see, oh, can I figure out what the parameters were or in order to get the data itself. But with fully homomorphic encryption, we encrypt it at the very start. So we only send this encrypted model to the global server. And this global server does not need to unencrypt it. So it does not need a key. It doesn't need to know what the raw parameters was. And then it can use that to automatically for its training and aggregation. Yeah, it can use it for the aggregation. So it doesn't need to know the underlying model. And this would basically secure it from any types of inference attacks.
Okay. Well, Micah has one raising his hand
So
here.
I just want to clarify that the inference attacks you're talking about are those carried out at the server, and you're not using FHE on the client to protect against inference attacks at that point, correct?
Wait, sorry, my volume
Oh,
was
yeah, I think I know the answer, so I'll just say it more like a statement, just for the audience. That what you're saying about the inference attacks, you're specifically talking about when they're carried out by the server, because that is where you're doing the FHE computation. The clients in this model are still doing training in the clear. It is still, you're not addressing the attacks from a malicious client running the inference attack. You're doing it from the server. In order to run it on the client, you need to extend the system some more, and it also introduces tremendous overhead. I don't think you're doing that. I just wanted to clarify that when you said that made the comment about protecting against the inference attacks, that's true specifically at the aggregation point, not at the clients, which is a separate solution.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Great. Well, then I just want to say thank you, Alan, it's a great piece of work and a great presentation here, particularly given you did mention that you're an undergrad, so you're just starting your sort of research journey. I imagine you probably have a lot of great things to do in the years ahead. So great start to this, and thank you for sharing this work with us. We're really impressive.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's move on. Next piece of the show is a fireside chat. And so I'm joined here by Micah Scheller. He recently joined Flower. Let me just tell you a little bit about Micah, and then we can dive in and have a bit of Q&A. For those who are online or on our Slack, feel free to think of a couple of questions you might want to ask him too. A bit about Micah. Micah spent 20 plus years at Intel Research. He did seminal work on SGX. He was one of the people who got the OpenFL framework started and off the ground, and it had such a big impact on the way people thought about and performed federated learning. And I note that one of the things one of the things I remember about him is that he was one of the key people behind this creation of a 71 medical site demonstration of federated learning, which is actually one of the best data points that we have so far in the form of a rigorous real-world empirical result that demonstrates the benefits of doing federated learning systematically when you're able to access data that you normally wouldn't be able to access, when you're building models in the medical space in this case. Also of late, he's worked a lot with ML Commons, which is an organization that is seeking to help us set standards and best practices in many areas. And in particular, he's contributed to their efforts in the direction of federated learning and healthcare. And then, as I mentioned before, he most recently joined Flower. And so I thought it was a great time to have a chat with him and get questions from the audience. So welcome, Micah.
Thank you.
I'm going to just change one thing I think if I press this button, you are now your images focus on the screen. So that's great. I'll stop sharing. And okay, so Micah, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions that I've actually always wanted to sort of chat with you about. And so one of the first questions that came to mind would be, what drew you to federated learning in the first place? And sort of what has sort of sustained this passion in this direction for quite a number of years for you?
Yeah. So I came to it actually through adversarial machine learning. I was specifically working in Intel's Security and Privacy Research Lab, working, as you mentioned, on the trusted execution side. So 2009 through, I would say, 13, I was very heavily focused specifically on that. But as we developed it, it became clear that we also need to demonstrate what you could do with it. And we began looking at interesting use cases, and we found machine learning and looked at all the ways we could potentially attack a machine learning system. That led us to adversarial machine learning, which is a fascinating topic I also love. And as you might imagine, when I saw the FL paper in, what was it, April 2016, I think maybe, is when McMahon's paper came out, McMahon and team's paper. It was this giant open system ripe for attacking using adversarial machine learning. And it made total sense that we might find some really strong places to apply hardware-based security to harden the whole system. And that's really the impetus for getting into it. But once I got into it, it really tapped into something I care a lot about in just my personal career, which is collaboration. I am a fairly social person. I like working with people on projects. I love thinking at a whiteboard with people. And FL by necessity demands you work with people. And I would say that is probably the number one reason is all the people that I've gotten to work with and know in the space. I do love the topic. I love many topics, but it's the fact that this one actually feeds another need for me, which is just the stimulation of working closely with people on hard problems. Adversarial machine learning was more lonely, really fun, but more lonely. So I think
I
that's
really
probably
like I really like how you drew a connection between federated learning, which really requires collaboration between machines, and how just building these systems inherently means that we actually have to often work with lots of different stakeholders, organizations, people who have the compute, people who have data. It's actually a very collaborative exercise on the personal human point of view too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not, I mean, I am working toward a future where the machines can do all the organization and policy checking and everything for us because that is valuable. But we are not very close to that yet, and there's still a major human element in the problem space.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, sure. Well, it reminds me that you've worked extensively on the sort of the security side of federated learning. We need to get a lot of things right to provide the kind of assurances that we aspire to when we build these systems. And so, what do you think is the biggest security misconception in the federated or decentralized field today?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I'll answer that in terms of what I think are the lead use cases, because of course the answer really is always going to be use case dependent. But I think
Mhm.
generally, if I look across publications and research that I know of, I would say the biggest gap is an understanding, you know, kind of going back to the same thing, the human element. Security is about building trust between people ultimately, and you use the technology to assist that. But at the end of the day, there are people, stakeholders who are going to say, we trust this system. And what I see all too often is it's like it's treated as sort of a checkbox or a checklist of get the right words in place, get the right ideas that are sort of supposed to be best practices, when in fact, for real deployment, what you have to do is get the stakeholders all on the same page. And that means you need understanding between the technical stack, the I should say the security part of the technical stack, the infosec officers were responsible for making sure that either intellectual property or personal data is kept private, and the legal people who have to be able to say, okay, and now what remains above the technology in legal form suffices as well. I ran through that really quickly, so please ask questions there because that's a complex topic. But where I want to get to is in this giant federation, these 71 hospitals. Part of what was so thrilling and difficult about that is these were hospitals not in the same partner network. They were distributed across the world, different policies, different requirements. And it was really built on the popularity and collaborative strength of Dr. Spirit and Bacchus, who's now in Indiana. I mean, it never would have happened without him having this trust relationship with all these existing research groups. But at the end of the day, they needed approvals from their security folks and their InfoSec folks. And so a huge part of my contribution was to speak directly to those people, get their requirements, and understand what they needed in terms of assurances and documentation and design information from me. And that meant finding the right, 2-page document for that department to look over and say, this meets what we need. This explains it. Here's exactly the code where you should go read to find out the thing you want to know about basically how open the network connection really is, right? That comes down to understanding stakeholders. There's no pattern yet that everyone can fall back to. So the hard part I would say the hard part in this notion of a cross-silo federated learning space is making sure everyone's on the same page. And I'll flip now to cross-device. And I don't have as good an idea of what the hard parts are there exactly. I just know that the reality is this, where it's been successful in cross-device so far, this idea of making sure everyone is on the same page is actually not so central. Because if you think about those environments, the trust relationship is between the users of a service that already collects tremendous amounts of information about them. If you don't trust Google's secure aggregation algorithm, why do you have an Android phone? That's just wild, right? So the trust relationship is often inherently actually quite strong despite the way the research is written. So I actually think the security questions in that space are not that well formed because they haven't honestly been pushed hard. Because the reality is the people who are agreeing already actually have quite a lot of trust in the service provider. So anyway, I just want to bring that up because I'm sure there are people in the audience who care about cross-device more than cross-silo.
Oh, that makes sense because, I mean, we refer to these often as one term, but actually the requirements in the cross-device and requirements in the cross-silo setting are just so you could easily just have two different domains and we could just, they just like loosely tied to each other. So it's really true.
Yeah, actually, one of the messages that I was hoping to drive home this last week at the boot camp in Berkeley is that the current research in FL is often taking the problems that we see in the cross-device scenario and applying them to cross-silo. And it gives this false impression that those are the important problems in cross-silo, when in fact they usually aren't that important. It's usually coming more down to these transparency, verifiability, trust relationship pieces, and less to communication cost and compute overhead, right? Those often don't really rise to the level of being very important in a cross-silo setting compared to verifiability and trust.
Absolutely, no, I agree with that. I guess so. Another question I want to ask you is also it's kind of connected, but so what excites you the most about joining Flower Labs? What do you think you can get done here?
I warned you that I'm kind of a kiss ass dude. So you're my supervisor. That's one of the top ones. I love the idea of working for you. So I'm going to say that in front of everybody because I gave you fair warning that I might do something like that. But it is, there are a number of things. There are a lot of wonderful teams in the federated learning space, but Flower has always stood out as the most open, most engaged with the community. And then knowing you and Daniel and Tanner, knowing that actually the people behind the scenes, that is what they believe, that is who they are, not just the face they put. It's always made it an attractive idea to work with you guys. So it's sort of, I would say, the lead that we have, or I'll say this because coming from the outside, it appeared this way, and I still think it's true. The lead we have in the community engagement, the mission and attitude of the company from the top down. And then, of course, it's just a lot of really talented, wonderful people. And when Patrick came over, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm having a lot of fun. This group's really great." And it just made a lot of sense to me at that point. It's sort of like, yeah, it sounds funny. I've flirted with the idea already. And now to have sort of Patrick's confirmation that this is really a great place to work. And so it's also the ability to have the kind of impact in the actual FL research space from how much reach Flower has. I think one of the big things that I've always believed here is that the research science, we're answering whatever problems we can kind of get some handle on, but we're not actually tackling it like you would want to do this given its empirical nature. And that once we finally have that ability to easily and quickly run experiments, it'll just completely change our priority list, right? We'll finally be able to see what matters. And to get there, you just need a really strong community or ecosystem, as we would say in corporate world. And Flower is the company that I see putting the most, love into building that kind of community and ecosystem. So yeah, I hope that wasn't entirely too saccharine, but it's true.
No, so thank you. We're really excited to have you join us as well, because your work's really influenced the way that we've thought about the space for a long time. And so, yeah, it's just great to be working together on these things. I guess another question that comes to mind is are there particular challenges in federated learning you're hoping to tackle now that you're with Flower?
So obviously, a lot of the security privacy stuff is near and dear to my heart. I would say just because of sort of the reality of customer priorities, it's not that I expect to be moving that work forward tremendously over where it's been, but the reality is it wasn't the next step of the work anyway. The next step of the work is essentially socializing ideas, getting more people involved and getting more input. Like coming from security, we have a lot of good ideas of how to be very clear about what we're talking about, how to carefully define what we mean. And that has been lacking. Machine learning community doesn't have the same thing when it comes to system building. Why would it, right? It's just natural. So bringing some of that discipline, helping make that a little more commonplace and easy so that all the people with the perspectives that I don't have can start having this more precise conversation about what they need in terms of security and privacy. So that's kind of like helping bring the ecosystems, the community to the same place that the security community is. That remains always kind of an interesting challenge to me because it has this sort of, I need to teach you so you can teach me kind of flavor to it, which is really fun. And then I would say the other piece is just the system building thing is not always attractive to everybody, but to me, it's very exciting to imagine getting to the point where we actually have usable, reusable systems for running complex federations. My initial challenge with FL was I was doing security analyses on synthetic use cases. I didn't have real data. It was worthless really to analyze because like the adversarial machine learning properties vary tremendously based on the data itself that's used to train the model, right? So it's like the work that I started in 2016 and 17 had to be put on pause and is still kind of on pause until we can really start to run a lot of experiments through. So building that system, and the degree to which Flower is engaged on that, I don't know that I should speak to that exactly, being so new. But I know Flower has ambitions there. ML Commons has ambitions there, working with ML Commons to bring that forward so the research community can really start to run real experiments. I think that's, again, not as much fun maybe on the math front as an aggregation algorithm. But right now, all the work on aggregation algorithms is just sort of on toy. And so we don't even know if we're studying the right thing. And I want to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. And one of the most exciting things that we get to do at Flower is when people bring us their aspirations to build these big federations, and they want help in doing that. And so it's always great to see someone or an organization. You remember when you might have started working with them a year ago, and then after a year, or even after maybe these days, we see people after a month that have built serious federated systems across the globe. And then from that point, you can start to see some of these real problems that you're saying that are not so easily studied without the system being there. I guess one final question is, in this sort of space, what do you hope to bring to the Flower community in particular?
Well, I mean, I enjoy community engagement. I enjoy conversation about, specific conversation where we really dig into the meat of things. I hope to be able to be somebody that's a really good sounding board for the pieces that I have experience in. And then selfishly, I hope to bring enough value that people want to talk to me enough that I can learn a bunch from all the other people, right? It's like, in many ways, I want to be a visible piece of the community. I want people to reach out to me with questions around privacy and security concerns. Um, the privacy solutions are not a complete coverage because privacy is a very broad, ill-defined topic, really. So there are plenty of gaps left to explore. Um, and so I'm hoping that if I prove to be helpful enough, I'll get the kind of engagement that will help me also then in turn learn about what people care about, what problems they're facing, and then the ideas they have, of course, to solve these. It's not like they're all going to come from me by any means. So I think it's that piece. I want to be a good, healthy part of this community where I can take the background I have, make it available, of course, within the constraints of wanting to hang out with my kids too, and then in turn
Sure.
get a chance to really broaden my network of people that I work with and learn from.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, then I think we have time for one or two questions from people who have dialed in. Let's see if anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'll also take a look on Slack. But let me take a quick look what we have. Let's see. Oh, I see. Yeah, just a quick question here. The person asks, what's the next big federation you want to build?
Okay, so I would love to help bring the sort of full operation potential to this hospital federation. That 71 hospital group that Spiros has brought together, they're still going, or we're still going, and we've run experiments, but it's a lot of work. I'd love to bring the tools that we're building to that and help establish that. But then the other is I really want to see this notion of a national or even international data exchange platform that hopefully allows easy access to an easy way to find one another through a registry. Some people may have heard of the ARPA-H index program. While that program's gone, the motivations are still there and the efforts are still there to really create a national network for medical research. And as a part of that, offering federated living services. The dream is build the system that allows the medical researchers to search for specifically that data that matches their needs scientifically, but also matches their requirements organizationally, and basically be able to do put together a federated data set of willing partners without having to take 6 months of back and forth and discussion and hunting. So it's not a specific federation, though. I guess I'd love to see a federated validation data set for digital pathology and for brain MRIs, right? It'd be great to see that happen. But on a broader scale, it's enabling that for many medical use cases, probably starting in imaging, because that's where a lot of the momentum of the people I've worked with is. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I imagine this the type of evaluations that could be done through such a network would be really important, I think, in being able to verify quickly types of screeners, other types of models, particularly as so many models are kind of coming down the pipe. People really want to experiment and push AI as far as they go. So really, I guess it's up to us as a community to be ready to test these various models in a very rigorous, diverse network of test data that could only really be built in a federated fashion.
Yeah, that is a whole fun conversation we could have too. Just the short of it being that, in my experience, the groups that I've been working with, the number one call is for federated data sets for verification and validation of models. It's like, we'll get to learning. We want to do that, but first, I mean, the FDA is saying we want federated data sets that we know the data, we know the data is good, we know it provides the coverage we need, we know it meets our, well, we know it meets the previous administration's requirements about diversity. But something they can depend on to be the right data set for validating certain tasks, and that would have to be done in a federated fashion. And you just explore all the bits and pieces they need to go into that, and then you pretty much have everything you need for federated learning once you're done with that. So, but it is right now, I think, the primary motivator for certain efforts, I should say.
It's interesting how that often we start talking about medical scenarios, healthcare scenarios, but then if you think all the other types of silos of AI, they really need the same thing. So if you talk about legal, finance, education, any of these sectors that AI is really trying to change, they also need these evaluation networks for us to kind of so we can tell the difference between the junk and the good models. We'll need this diverse types of data.
I apologize if I'm taking time that's not mine to take, but I have to chime in here that there's this office. We often say sensitive data like medical data. That's a little misleading. The reason why we're leading in the medical space in federated learning is because it's the less sensitive data. People are willing to share sensitive information when it's for common good. Privacy becomes far less important to people when you're talking about curing cancer. Whereas a lot of the actual high value federations that are out there, the public wouldn't support. They're more for the company, not for the people. So the actual privacy call is considerably stronger. And then you also have the intellectual property considerations. So really, many of the industries that are interested in federated learning are waiting to see it proven in healthcare, because healthcare is where there's the momentum and common good drive to actually do it and overcome these sensitivity concerns. So to me, medical data is the easy one to get access to, right? Financial data and insurance and claim data, energy usage data, research, right? Trial data from research trials. There's a lot of these other fields that are actually, because it's not just the privacy concern, but it's also the intellectual property concern, and the people are far less forgiving. Yeah, they're actually a lot harder, but we present it in a different way than the way I see it all the time. We say, oh, really sensitive stuff like medical data. It's interesting to me. Yeah,
exactly. No, it's great. Well, we could carry on for quite a while, I'm sure, but I need to move on to the next segment. But so thank you, Micah. It's great chatting with you today. It's great working with you every day now. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
Breathing my teeth. Thank you.
Sure thing. So then our final piece to the Flower Monthly for February is to introduce a group of speakers who really did an incredible job at the Distributed AI Hack Berlin. I believe that's the official name of the event. This was done with Flower in collaboration with Excelsius, and was sponsored by AMD. It happened back in November. And then I was collecting photos from the event. And then for those who are looking at the screen here, you'll notice that on the left-hand side towards the bottom, we see a group of individuals here holding a cup. And that's because they were the winners of a particular category. And they're with us here today. And so we are going to hear from Edgar, Emirkan, and Justus. They're going to give us sort of a summary, their perspective on the Distributed AI Hackathon. A recap is their title, and so I can't wait to hear from these folks and hear their perspective on the hackathon experience and what they built and how they see the whole area. So thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you here today.
Yeah, all right. I would say just let's get started. Yeah, this hackathon was back in November last year, and it was in Berlin, and it is actually healthcare adjacent. So we are going to walk you through how we as a team approach the hackathon, some tips and tricks that we've come up with over multiple hackathons, and we'll also present our findings. But first, we'll get a small introduction started. So that's the team. We're actually 4 people. So I'm Justus. I'm a computer science student at Technical University Berlin, and I work as a working student in data engineering in a Berlin-based startup. And I'm here with Emirkan today and with Edgar.
Yeah, right. I'm Edgar. I am also studying computer science at the Technical University in Berlin together with Justus, and I'm also a working student as an AI engineer at a smaller German startup called Starwit.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emirkan. I'm a student at the Hasso Plattner Institute in Potsdam, and I study computer science there in my master's and with the specialization in security. And I'm also working at the Hasso Plattner Institute as a cybersecurity engineer at the Hasso Plattner Institute's identity leak tracker, which is kind of an alternative to Have I Been Pwned, if you have heard about it. So we check your email for data breaches and notify the users.
And you might have noticed that Julian is missing today. I think he has something important to do, but he's the 4th guy in the team. So this photo was actually taken during the hackathon, during a small break that we took. So we arrived on a Friday on the hackathon in Berlin. I think on the slide beforehand it was 200 people. I didn't count, but I think that fits. And we didn't really know what we would encounter. The announcement was that there would be AMD as a sponsor and also Flower. And as a small disclaimer, we as a team didn't have any touch points with federated learning before. We have some ML experience, but not federated learning. So we were curious. And then in the introduction, the challenge was announced to us, and the challenge was train a binary classifier on this chest X-ray dataset. I think it's a very popular dataset out there for medical imaging, and we have to train that model, and we'll get scored on an evaluation set that is hidden, and the best model wins. So it's very competitive. The hack started on Friday, and the results had to be handed in on Saturday. And you also have to sleep, and the venue was closed. So the hacking time was around, I would say, like 12 hours. And another hint, federated learning, and also just 15 minutes or 20 minutes later on, I think it was adjusted, of GPU time on the provided AMG cluster. So that's a concern or a limitation. So after that introduction, we as a team had already gathered, and we got a seat at the venue and started hacking. So first of all, what we did is we didn't like pull up the code editor and start right away. What you have to do is kind of organize yourself. So that's the first hint that we can give that is working really well in hackathons. Take your time, brainstorm ideas. This hackathon was really like based on performance. You have to get a good score at the end, but on some hackathons, it will be something about business case or some creative idea. So take your time, speak with people, draw up ideas. In this case, what we did is we split each other into smaller groups. So Edgar and Julian were working on models, information that they can find regarding this data set or chest X-rays in general, because they are the experts in machine learning in our team. I was looking into the infrastructure, into the cluster that was given to us, into Flower, how it was set up with a boilerplate, and also into something like a pipeline that we can iterate on. So weights and biases, GitHub, all that stuff. And Emirkan was the one who was looking into Flower. So what is a strategy? What is federated learning? How does the model then aggregate, or how does the server aggregate the different models? That was Emirkan's task. And I can really emphasize this. Make yourself a roadmap, synchronize during the hackathon, talk about blockers, what is blocking you, how can somebody else unblock you. So I don't want to wait 1 hour for Emirkan. I have to talk to him. That's very important. So after that, I personally inspected like the cluster, what's on there. There was a boilerplate about this scenario. So we have this data set that was split into 3 virtual hospitals by Excelsius. So the partner of the hackathon, the one that was organizing it. And these hackathons had the X-ray data set split. You can see it on the slide, hospital A, B, and C. So we have to train in a federated manner on these hospitals and then aggregate. And the boilerplate was federated averaging, FedF. Yes?
Just want to mention, do you have slides that you're showing?
Oh, we're not. Oh, okay. That's
I can see the slide.
Oh, you can see.
I could also see the slides.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, it might just be my view then. Okay, that's great to know,
How's
because it
it
just
for everything else?
No, I saw the slides. I think it was fine.
Okay,
Alan,
okay.
how
Sorry,
about you?
didn't.
Can you see the slides?
Not right now.
Okay, I think
There's
stopped the sharing.
yeah, but somebody else also wrote that he or she
Was able to see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
It might have just. Sorry to interrupt you. It's just that you mentioned
No
the slide and it
problem.
wasn't shown.
That would
Okay.
be unfortunate. Yeah, so we had a baseline federated averaging. I think the baseline was 1 local epoch per server round and 100 server rounds. So that's the baseline that was given to us. And from that we started to iterate. And that's where Edgar is going to tell us more about.
I thought we will share a bit about our model development process, because as Justus already said, we got like a really basic baseline which we tried to set up and get working. Also with the pipeline we developed to get like a working baseline as fast as possible, because I mean, as Justus had already told us, we had like a really limited amount of time in total, but also a really limited amount of time per job that we could do on the GPU. So we first tried to set up a really basic ResNet that was given to us. It was a non-pre-trained model in the sense what like randomly initialized, but that's what was our baseline. And we actually also tried to get as most performance out of this as we could during this hackathon, but it was really noisy. We noticed really fast, and we could actually get this up to a relatively okay-ish score, but not really great. But in parallel, we also tried to iterate really fast on other kinds of models. For example, we pivoted relatively fast to pre-trained backbones, and what we basically could do in this scenario is try to iterate as fast as possible and get as many models out as possible, because that's basically the only way we could find out if something works or not. Because yeah, also sometimes our domain knowledge really didn't apply here, because models where we thought would work really great just couldn't finish like 1 epoch or 2 epochs, so it didn't really work what we expected would work in the beginning. For example, we tried different versions of vision transformers and couldn't really achieve anything with this. And also during like iterating this fast, we could appreciate the how easy it was to also work with the whole Flower framework, because as Justus has said, we never really worked with federated learning, but even we could, one slide back, please, again, sorry. But even we could easily schedule jobs, do the federated learning across all 3 hospitals, try out different federated learning approaches. Yeah, this was really cool to see. And yeah, in the end, we tried out many different things. What really worked for us is, for example, our best model in the end was a DanceNet, and we focused mainly on fine-tuning. So, of course, training a DanceNet from scratch in this particular time constraint is not really practical. So what we mainly focused on is many little tricks like loss functions and other stuff we know, but mainly trying to fine-tune as many later layers that we could in the given time. And that's what achieved the best score for us. In the end, I mean, you can go to the next slide, please. We didn't know the whole hackathon. We didn't know the scores of the other teams. Like, we had no idea how good other teams performed. We just saw a score like 0.77 something. We didn't know if it was good or not. So it was kind of fun, but also nerve-wracking, I would say. So the best model, as said, was a DenseNet 1-to-1. It's basically a convolutional neural network with a few extra quirks, like it has, like the name says, dense connections to basically all the layers in a feed-forward way. And we, as I said, we tried many tricks to also, for example, make the training faster, because this was the main bottleneck. And we did the fine-tuning. Funny story, actually, for the federated setup, in the end, for us, the Fed average won, which was the default that was given to us. But we actually tried out different strategies that mainly Emirkan researched and told us, let's try this. And basically for every one of the best models we had, we tried different strategies. And I mean, also the flower people that were at the hackathon told us, yeah, Fed average is often a really good performing one. And that's also what we found, even though we tried different strategies, which was fun to see. So here you can see like our score across the hospitals. I mean, you see it's kind of similar in every hospital, but since the data, I don't know if Justus said this in the beginning, but the data across the hospitals is really unfairly distributed. I mean, this was like a really huge challenge, because for example, in one hospital, there were only really old people, and in other really young people, or much less people than in the others. So this was also one of the main challenges, and we couldn't really look into this. So we had to find a fair strategy to make one model that performs really good in all the hospitals. And yeah, we have like a small what we learned slide, because this was also a really new experience for us. And I mean, I basically already said it's especially in this specific event, it was what we learned is that it was really important to be as fast as possible and not to try the fanciest stuff in the book, or you see somewhere, because maybe it's not even possible. And to get probably would be possible to train a really good model with enough time, enough compute, but yeah, we had to quickly quickly learn to not do this in this setup, and more focus actually on smaller tweaks that we could do it. I can remember there were like really small things, like a small change in the loss function, or a small change how we aggregate, or other small things that also sped up the training like by a huge amount. How we store the tensors, for example, was like one small trick that was not there per default, which gave us a huge speed up and maybe even an edge. Yeah, and that's how we in the end won. Yeah, winning was by having the best score in the end for this category. Yeah.
Yes. And I really want to emphasize that when working with Flower, it was relatively easy because the documentation is very extensive. There's a lot of code already built-in Flower regarding strategies, regarding how to set it up and configs. I can remember Emirkan, for instance, he told us about a strategy that was in research, relatively recent, I think, and we were able to implement it with the example from Flower. I think it's FedBN. It didn't perform as good as the average strategy, but still. And that's us, by the way, winning. I wasn't there at the ceremony, but still, that's the trophy we got. And one funny story is you can also get creative. So one thing that we did, for instance, is we wanted to store checkpoints between model runs, but then this got banned during the hackathon. So that's something you can think about. Pre-trained models, for instance, also got banned during the hackathon. So models that were already exactly pre-trained on X-ray. But so these are like the fun little things that you can get creative in these challenges. And there's, by the way, there's the code. We polish it up a little. It's running on Flower. You can download it. And we would be very interested in someone with large compute and some little spare time to run this. If you want to, just run it with the average strategy in Flower and like make an issue on the GitHub, tell us your score. It would be nice to see if you can beat us. I think that would be interesting. Otherwise, we are open to questions or to chat. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. That was a great presentation. It was very interesting to see how you kind of approach things. Let me say, if anyone is online and they want to ask a live question, please raise your hand. I'll be looking as usual in our Flower Slack for any questions that have been posed by people there. I'll just start scouting and seeing what I can find. I see. This is a good one. Someone says, it's quite a short one. Did you try Fedprox?
Fedprox strategy-wise?
Yeah, strategy-wise, that makes sense.
I don't think so.
I can't remember. No, I don't think so. No.
I also don't think so.
Is it a recent one or a more fancy one or something?
It's been around for a long time, and it's often quite effective in strongly skewed distributions between sites and so on. So I can see why somebody wanted to ask that question, but if you didn't try it, that's okay. That's the easy answer. So no, didn't try it. So you've got the code right there. So that person or anyone else, feel free to give it a try. It's probably not too hard, and we can see how it goes. I can look in the same channel. They said, have you been on a hackathon before and as the same team? So that I'm interested in that answer. Oh, yes. So this is not your first hackathon?
No.
We have been, I think Justus and I have been together in 3 hackathons now, and with Emirkan in 2 hackathons. So we live together in a shared flat, and we also studied together in our bachelor's degree. So we know each other, we all study the same, and that's probably what makes it easier for us to work together. There are also a few other people like Julian in this image. He studies with us. He doesn't live with us, but he studies with us. So we all know each other, and we have been to hackathons also together, which is quite fun. But this was our most recent one. We haven't been to one after that.
Yeah. I see. That makes sense. I mean, I would have asked the same question, I think, because when you were describing the approach and the philosophy, it felt like this was a really good recipe to approach hackathons, just even in general. I think, I'll actually ask one question myself, which would be, we are quite interested in running hackathons more and more. It seems to engage particularly with younger people, but also just engage the community in a way that's different from just showing slides and talking. Doing is a different kind of energy to it. And so is there any kind of tips or suggestions you would have for future hackathons that we run? We're always happy to get feedback or just ideas. Is there anything that you guys want to suggest?
I think this one was really well set up. This had boilerplate code to get started with Flower. This had, I think, personnel from Flower at the event, so you can talk to them. This had a really nice setup from the guys at Excelsius to get on the cluster to train. So like some
Also,
guards
the AMD
trailed,
guys.
and someone from
Sorry.
AMD also for questions. Yep. Yep.
Maybe
So boilerplate setup.
from my side,
Okay, guess.
I think this hackathon is, I mean, from what I have seen or heard, was quite unique because it was only performance based, and I mean there was a jury in the end. You had to present, but it was most of the time when you are at the hackathon, I think it's more about like being creative, but maybe you can find like a connection between. It doesn't have to be a business case per se, but maybe because I mean it was really fun, but maybe like with a more creative work or something, I don't know, would be also fun. But I like the setup too. So it was really competitive in a way. You have to push the score further and further. So it was also cool. Yeah.
No, but that's a good point. I can see in an effort to make things kind of a bit more quantitative and a kind of almost like a race that can drown out a little bit of creativity. So that's a good suggestion. We can factor that in for future ones. Well, thanks guys. That's a great presentation. Really interesting. I am going to share the final slide, which is essentially saying thank you to everyone for coming today. Thank you for those in attendance. Thank you for the people who have provided talks, or in the case of Mike, we had a bit of a chat. So thank you also for coming. Our next meeting will be on March the 4th. It's a Wednesday. It's at that new time of the same time that we started today, of 1800 UTC. So that's 10 a.m. San Francisco, 7 p.m. Berlin, 6 p.m. London, 1 p.m. New York. And if you are interested in Flower Monthly in general, we have the URL here. We're always pretty keen to see feedback about Flower Monthly. How can we make things even better for the community? What type of content do you want to see produced? We have a dedicated Slack channel called #Flower-Monthly. We have a workspace under Slack for just general discussions and building and questions and sharing of work that people are doing in the federated and decentralized space. And finally, we have our calendar for both these sort of online events, but also the in-person events that we find so fun, like the hackathon we've ended this session with. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the Flower AI Summit coming middle of April to London. So thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful. Take care, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.